This week on the Wealth Cafe, we're going to have a little bit of a different conversation. Over the weekend, I ran my first and honestly, probably my last half marathon, which is 13.1 miles. And I wanted to go through some of the lessons that I learned and how there are also some financial lessons throughout this entire process. So, to give you the backstory, I started training for this back in early January, when it's nice and cold outside, everyone's favorite time to run in New Jersey. I signed up for the race while I was in that New Year's hype. We all have those exciting New Year's dreams, and we're thinking to ourselves, what do I want this year to look like? So when I was on vacation for New Year's, I was thinking, okay, what do I want 2025 to look at like, and what is one big dream and goal that I have for the year? And one of the things that kept coming to mind for me was I wanted to do something to physically and mentally challenge myself. And as somebody who has never been a runner, and I say that fully confident in this moment, I love to work out, I love to live an active lifestyle. Running's just never been for me. And so that's where the mental portion of this came in, right? It's a physical challenge to run 13.1 miles, but doing all of the training mentally and the cost on your body, making the time in your life, mentally coaching yourself through those long runs, it really came to me that I was like, I think this is a challenge I want to take on for this year. And as I was going through the process, I realized how many different lessons that I was learning. So when you're in this training process every week for, I think my plan was around 12 to 14 weeks. I'd have to go back and look. It was, every week you're building upon it, right? You're running further, you're doing these different sprints to help increase the stamina you have and also decrease the amount of time that you are spending during each mile. And it's challenging, right? But it reminded me too of when we build a financial plan for clients. And when I am working with clients in the beginning, we're like, okay, do you have beneficiaries on your documents? Do we have, all these simple building basic blocks, right? And as their lives, though, get more complicated. You have kids, grandkids, you start to really amass some wealth. Things get a little more complicated, right? It gets a little more challenging, and we have to make the time and set it aside to make sure we're paying for attention to our finances. As I was having to find more time in my schedule to do these longer runs. And at times, it can be pretty frustrating when it comes to your finances of, oh, now I have to make sure I have a trust set up for any of the minors in my life. And then to the running equation was, oh my goodness, I have to make sure I have time to go do one of my longest runs was 11 miles before the event. I had to find the time in my schedule in order to do that. And we can get frustrated, right? And that seems to happen. And the second lesson that I learned is it's never a smooth ride. And that happens a lot in our finances. We've seen it in the markets the last couple of weeks that volatility happens. Things happen. There would be runs where I would go out there and the previous week it had been a great run. I felt good. I was, moving along at a good pace. I felt great afterwards. And then all of a sudden, the next week, maybe I didn't sleep as well. Maybe I was working longer hours and so I was more fatigued and I just wouldn't feel as good during those runs. And that's the same thing that can happen in our finances. There are outside factors that we often can't control. Maybe you lose a job. Maybe your spouse gets sick and, it adds excess medical bills. There are things that we can't control. And one week we might be feeling great about our finances, or even one year. And then fast forward to the next, we're starting to feel uncertain, like a lot of people are right now. And so it's amazing, to be able to see all these parallels that were starting to come together. The third one that I had that really came to me on race day. Now it was interesting. You get to the race. I personally did the Jersey City. It was a marathon and a half marathon. We were all going out at once. And it's really interesting to me as you show up and they have all of these different sections based on your running time. So I was in one of the further back ones, totally fine with that. I wanted to be able to maintain a certain pace throughout the race. And as I'm standing in my corral, I'm looking around at all the people, and we all have such different gear. Granted, it's now 6 in the morning. It was a little bit of a chillier day. So you have some people who have jackets on. You have some people who are in shorts and a t-shirt. You have some people who have backpacks to run on. Other people who have like that handheld water bottle that goes over your hand. Some people ran in banana costumes, to each their own. And what it reminded me of in our financial journey is that it's personal. right? The way you run and the way you prepare for the race or the way you build your financial plan and manage things, it's all personal. That's why I laugh whenever someone tells me they're like, oh, well, this social media post says that everyone needs X, Y, and Z. It's a pretty blanketed statement. We all have such different lives, hopes, dreams, goals, financial situations. So to make these blanket statements or even to show up to a race all in the same gear, it wouldn't make sense, right? We all have different things that we're trying to do. For me, that morning of the race, I was just hoping to finish at that point. I couldn't believe I had made it this far into the process. I was really proud of myself for how much I was running. And my goal was to get across that finish line. Some people, when they're looking at their finances, their goal really is just to get to that finish line of life and to make sure they have enough money to weather all the storms and also celebrate all the wins. Other people want to amass incredible wealth. We all come into this with a different journey and a different, mindset when it comes to how we want to be prepared for the race and what kind of gear we want to have. The fourth lesson also came on that morning, and I loved as you're running and you're, weaving through all these different parts and different cities and to see all of the people out there cheering, right? Some people are just locals to the area and wanted to come out and see the race and were just so excited to have this in their community. You had other people who had their friends and family. I was lucky enough to have a couple friends who were waiting for me at the finish line or at mile 12. And what's interesting is it reminded me of having your team, right? We can go it alone. We can manage our finances alone. You can go on trustandwill.com or whatever website and go and do it alone. But the thing is, you don't have to, right? I could have run that race alone. I could have been, just bopping along and hoping to make it to the finish. But when I was in the middle of that race, right? And I was like, why am I doing this? Why did I sign up for this? I did it to myself. But I knew I had people waiting for me at the end. I knew I had people who were excited to cheer me on, were so proud of what I had done from training to actually showing up to the race. And that's similar in your financial life. You can go it alone, but when you have those highs and lows, who's going to be in your corner, right? You had the market volatility again of the last week. And I'm having conversations with clients and we're talking through their plan. We're making sure, it's really holding up to the stress tests that we're experiencing right now and, making sure that they're still on track for their goals and dreams. Market volatility happens and this is something we factored in, but there's also that emotional side of it too, right? How are they feeling? Are they okay with the amount of risk that they have? They could go it alone, right? They could go on and read an article or ask ChatGPT, but most people don't want to. Finances are very emotional, and it's not something we want to do alone. You also have to celebrate the wins, right? One of my favorite things is when we set up 529 accounts for um, babies when they are born, and then you watch the whole process. And when you first set up the account, parents are always a little nervous. They're like, what if my kid doesn't go to college? What happens if we don't use the money? And we talk through all of these nuances. And then fast forward, that 16, 18 years, depending on when we set up the account, and to see their excitement when they're finally like, so here's where they're going to school. And we finally get to celebrate what that money is for. It feels so pie in the sky to say like, oh, we're going to save this money for college. But once you finally know the university or the college, or even if it's a different program they're going into, to be able to celebrate that and to see the next step, that is so exciting. And for me, it's so rewarding to be a part of that team and to celebrate them. Yeah, they could have gone online and set up a 529 account alone, but they wouldn't necessarily have had the same amount of guidance. And also, to that person that's with them when they were nervous at moments about what the money is going to look like, but also that person that's there to celebrate that crossing of the finish line. So it's a pretty exciting thing. The other thing, too, was as I was going through this race, you're surrounded by all these people who are also running, and you could walk off the course, right? I could have at any moment said, forget it. I'm done. I don't want to do this. And that's the same thing with a financial plan, right? It's one thing to build the plan, but then I remind people, and when we are doing annual reviews with clients every year, we come back and revisit that plan for the accountability, right? Are we tracking? Are we going to get to that finish line for whatever goals that they have, whether it's buying a second home, sending the kids to college, retirement, not outliving your money? And once again, you could do it alone. However, there's that moment of accountability. And I had it while I was running the race, right? Is that, okay, there's all these people with me together. And what was really cool, and I had never done a race before that had had a pacer in it. So I had this person who was running along, and she had a big sign that she was holding up that said the average pace that she was going to be maintaining per mile. And so I was like, oh, that's a really comfortable pace for me. I'd love to be running at that. I'd be really proud if I maintained that for the race. So I stayed with her for a good chunk of the race, and it was accountability, right? It was making sure that I was going to get to the end when I wanted to. And you became friends with the people who were around you, who were all coming together in this moment. And that's similar with your finances, right? You have that accountability and that person. And, I sit here and I say to clients, hey, how did it go? Did we, I sent you that estate attorney recommendation, or we were working on this, X, Y, and Z. Did we get that done? Like, where are we tracking on that? And if it's, and it goes back and forth, right? If there's something that they are waiting on me for, they can say back to me, like, how are we looking on this? And I'm like, you know what, let's check in on it. Let's check in and see how are we tracking towards that college savings. And it's you could tell it's college acceptance season around here. So I'm finding out from a lot of clients where their kids are going to be going in the fall. So it's clearly top of mind. But whether you are running a race, whether it's just the race of life, if you want to go down that analogy, there's so many different lessons to be learned. And the moral of the story is that you don't want to do it alone, and you want to have a plan that you can do all of this through. And it's really important to think about it, to have that training plan, to sit here and say, how am I going to win the race? I could have shown up on race day, having not trained, having done nothing. I know that's a big trend that people love to put on social media, but I wanted to feel good. I wanted to feel confident that I could cross that finish line and that I would be able to do those things. And that's the benefit of having a financial plan, about working with somebody and having that accountability and those people around you. Now, if this is something that you want to talk more about, you can head over to tanisfingroup.com/contact and apply for a complimentary introductory call. We can talk about, what does a financial plan look like? What does it look like to have that type of accountability? Because you don't have to do it alone. And honestly, we weren't meant to. I hope you enjoyed this slightly different episode of the Wealth Cafe. I'm going to be mixing in some more of these as our year goes on, and we have so many exciting things and coffee conversations coming. So please make sure you are subscribed to our channel, and I can't wait to see you all for the next episode. Bye.